Hello everyone, welcome to The Contrarian. For those of you who are new here, my name is Logan, and as the name of this channel implies, I like to go against common narratives that I believe most people have gotten wrong. And one of the narratives going around right now that almost everybody is assuming will inevitably happen is the rise of China as the global superpower, and that China will surpass the United States as the global superpower, and it will remain that way. And this is generally based off of the past growth China has experienced as a sign of how it could continue. However, due to several key Chinese economic and socio-economic factors, I will present the case as to why this will likely not happen, in my opinion. And I'm not alone. Thankfully, in thinking and researching this, Capital Economics, a global leader in independent economic research and studies, has recently released a study in which they summarize the reasons for why China has a lot of upcoming headwinds that make it very unlikely to become the global superpower, and if they were to, that it would only be for a brief period of time before the United States would overtake them again. And in short, the Achilles heel for China is its huge demographics issue, and the upcoming demographics issue China will face in the coming decades will be immense. Now, the fundamental drivers behind any economy are obviously the people behind the economy itself. And during the last 40 years of the immensely strong growth cycle in China, the demographics were very strong for this kind of cycle to occur. They had a large amount of people just coming of the age at which they were the strongest producers they would be, which is between the age of 30 and 60. And during this period of human life, people are generally the most productive they will be in their work. They are earning as much as they ever will, and they are also spending as much as they likely ever will. For example, think of your average 30-year-old. They're probably married, and maybe they have 1 or 2 kids in the next 10 years. From then on, they will be spending the most they likely ever will in being required to raise their children, and they are likely earning as much as they ever will from their employment. However, once their children grow up and begin taking on their own responsibilities, the spending of people 60 years or older generally drops significantly lower. After all, now they are needing to think about retirement, and as soon as they quit their jobs, their income effectively falls to zero, and they begin pulling money out of retirement accounts. And they simply don't need to spend as much as they used to, even if it is possible for them to. On the other hand, prior to when people reach this age bracket of 30 to 60, they also are not nearly as high of producers or spenders. They are likely growing in their career, or they're going to college and not producing anything yet, or if they are in a job, they are likely earning less than they will later on in life. Also, this younger group of individuals generally don't buy large ticket items such as houses or expensive cars, so they aren't large spenders either. So where I'm going with this is to present the big demographic problem that has also been the source of China's meteoric rise to where they are now. They had roughly 40 years of a very powerful industrialization cycle that raised the living standards, productivity, and spending of hundreds of millions of Chinese citizens, and this has made them the second largest global economic power, second only to the United States. Now, the demographic shift that occurred back in the middle of the 20th century was due to a very high fertility rate. Just look at the population pyramid for China in the year 1950. They had an immensely large amount of children and young adults who would grow up and produce this immense generation of workers who would be the driving force behind the rapid industrialization of China. Now, the problem with this kind of growth is you would need an ever-increasing number of children and young adults in order to sustain the aging prior generation as they retire and cease to be productive. And this is where China's weakness lies. They simply don't have near enough people in this age bracket. Looking at their current population pyramid and how it is broken down, they now have a large population of aging people who will soon begin retiring and already are retired to some extent, similar to the baby boomer generation in the United States, but much larger. And unlike the United States, China has far fewer up-and-coming individuals to sustain the economy going forward. They comparatively don't have a very large millennial population, in part due to their one-child policy. And this policy was largely aimed at trying to reduce the sheer population of China, because at the time severe famine and shortage of resources was a major problem. And even when the Chinese government ended this one-child policy, birth rates have stayed roughly the same, because by then it had become the cultural norm, as well as financially advantageous for couples to only have one child and both work instead. So as this large generation of Chinese workers who drove this production and spending spree begin to retire and end their lives, the workforce that replaces them will be much smaller, and this will likely reduce the demand for all of the needed resources as well as the available workforce in China. Already, China has some 50 million empty homes and entire cities of empty high-rises and apartments, and this is only a sign of what's to continue, which is a slump in demand for all of these government-produced houses. Don't forget, China is a command economy, meaning that the government and centralized powers make the decisions on where to allocate capital and how to employ people. So not only is this an immensely inefficient way to allocate capital, building houses that will essentially never be occupied, but the power and approval this form of government has had over the last 40 years will also begin to fall, and China could face the possibility of political upheaval. Remember, if they are forced to lay off many of their workers due to falling demand or stagnating economy, the citizens of China could begin to want a democratized form of government. Capital economics also points out that the end of the era of globalization and a newer era of returning essential industries to their respective countries. And if anything, COVID really accelerated this trend. So it is not only a demographic problem, but also trade will likely be more tough for China in the coming years, with the countries who are beginning to move back industries that were once relegated to developing countries, but it is now more advantageous for them to bring them home. So here I present to you the headwinds China is currently facing and that it will be facing in the coming decades. As to how this ultimately ends up will only be uncovered with the passing of time, but despite the common narrative out in the media and pretty much everywhere you look that the 21st century will be the century of domination by China, I don't really buy that right now. They could have everything else go fine, so ignoring the reverse of globalization, ignoring the potential for political upheaval, and they would still face a nearly insurmountable problem, in my opinion, of a shrinking workforce and an aging population of people who will need increased social program expenditure, medical care, and other expenses. So as to which other countries out there could be poised for a similar run-up in growth like what China did experience, the answer likely lies with India, Vietnam, and other Southeastern Asian countries whose demographic pyramids and industrialization mimic what China's was 40 years ago. And as for the United States, I believe they are poised to continue being the leading global economic force with moderate growth, as the millennial generation is already replacing the baby boomer generation as they retire, and the population is expected to continue growing due to relatively higher birth rates as well as immigration. So if you guys like this video, just consider subscribing to this channel. I really like to talk about ideas that I believe that most people have gotten wrong, and if you like this video, just consider giving it a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, give it a thumbs down and let me know why down in the comments, and I hope to see you again.